Hello there. Welcome to Love in Chapters, where every story is a journey of love, emotions, and heartwarming twists. I'm your host, Tommy. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're listening from. We love seeing our stories reach hearts all around the world. Also, if you enjoy heartfelt love stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new chapter of romance and passion. Now, let's begin. In the bustling heart of the city, Laura Mitchell sat at her worn desk, staring at the analytics dashboard of her blog. The numbers weren't lying. They hadn't been for the past 4 years. What had once been a rising star in digital journalism had become just another whisper in the vast ocean of online content. At 28, Laura's face still held the determination that had driven her to start her blog at 19, though now it was lined with the wisdom of someone who had tasted both success and bitter defeat. 9 years ago, armed with nothing but a second-hand laptop and an unwavering passion for journalism, Laura had transformed her small blog into something remarkable. She remembered those early days, working late into the night from her tiny studio apartment, surviving on instant noodles and coffee. By 21, her dedication had started paying off. Her blog began gaining traction, featuring exclusive stories that larger media outlets would later pick up. At 23, she had become the youngest independent journalist to receive the Digital Innovation Award, with her blog reaching millions of monthly readers. Running her fingers through her chestnut brown hair, Laura's hand unconsciously traced the small scar near her temple, a permanent reminder of the night that changed everything. The accident had been brutal. A drunk driver had run a red light, sending her car spinning across 3 lanes. 8 months in the hospital had seemed like an eternity, but it wasn't the physical recovery that had broken her spirit. During those months of isolation, cyber attackers had infiltrated her blog's database, erasing years of content and destroying her digital empire. 4 years, she whispered to herself, scrolling through her current statistics. 4 years of trying to rebuild, and still, her voice trailed off as she clicked through various articles. The quality was still there, perhaps even better than before, but the readers weren't. As she sipped her now cold coffee, her eyes drifted to the headline dominating every major news outlet. J-Tech stock soars 3,000% as mysterious CEO Jordan McKenney finally revealed. The photo accompanying the article showed a man in his early 30s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his strong jawline and penetrating green eyes commanding attention. Despite his youth, there was an air of authority about him that made his success seem inevitable rather than surprising. Laura leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. An exclusive interview with Jordan McKenney could be exactly what she needed, the story that would put her back on the map. Her best friend Bridget, who worked at J-Tech, had been feeding her information about the elusive CEO for weeks, but getting close to him had proved impossible. "Laura, you won't believe this." Bridget's voice burst through her phone speaker. "He's here. McKenney's actually in the building right now. He never comes to this office." Within 20 minutes, Laura had rushed to the J-Tech building, her heart pounding as she smoothed down her navy blazer. Using Bridget's employee access, she managed to position herself near the executive elevator just as Jordan McKenney emerged, surrounded by an entourage of suits. "Mr. McKenney," Laura called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Laura Mitchell from the Daily Pulse. Could I have a moment of your time?" Jordan McKenney paused, his green eyes fixing on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of interest, but it was quickly replaced by cool dismissal. "Miss Mitchell," he replied, his voice deep and commanding, "I don't do interviews. My PR team has made that quite clear." With a slight nod to his security team, he moved past her, leaving Laura standing there, clutching her notebook. But Laura Mitchell hadn't rebuilt her blog from nothing by giving up easily. 2 weeks later, she managed to attend a fundraiser where McKenney was scheduled to appear. She had carefully planned her approach, wearing a sophisticated black dress that helped her blend in with the high society crowd. This time, when she approached him at the bar, Jordan McKenney's dismissal held a touch of annoyance. "You're persistent, Miss Mitchell, I'll give you that," he said, setting down his scotch. "But persistence without permission is just harassment. Security?" As she was politely but firmly escorted out of the fundraiser, Laura felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. But beneath the embarrassment, her determination only grew stronger. Jordan McKenney might think he could dismiss her, but he hadn't faced anyone quite like her before. She had rebuilt her life from scratch once. She could certainly handle one arrogant CEO. Little did she know that fate had a different plan for them both, one that would begin in the most unexpected place, where pretense would fade away and true feelings would emerge from the most unlikely of arrangements. But for now, Laura returned to her apartment, kicked off her heels, and began planning her next move. The St. Mary's Children's Home annual charity gala was Laura's sanctuary, a place where she wasn't just another struggling journalist, but a mentor and friend to children who, like her younger self, had lost everything. The elegant ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel was filled with the city's elite, but Laura's attention was focused on a group of children performing a musical number on stage. Wearing a simple emerald green dress, one she'd saved for months to buy, Laura stood near the back, recording the performance on her phone. These were her kids, the ones she'd been teaching basic journalism and creative writing to every other weekend. 13-year-old Maria, who'd lost her parents in a house fire, was leading the song with a voice that could break hearts. "Miss Laura?" a small voice called out as the performance ended. Tommy, a freckle-faced 9-year-old, ran toward her, his slightly too large suit jacket flapping. "Did you see me? I didn't mess up the chorus this time." Laura knelt down, pulling him into a warm hug. "You were perfect, Tommy. Every single note." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small notebook with a pen attached. "For your investigative reporting," she whispered with a wink, watching his eyes light up. "Just like yours?" he asked, clutching the notebook to his chest. "Even better than mine," she smiled, ruffling his hair. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Laura looked up to see Jordan McKenney walking in, looking devastatingly handsome in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. Their eyes met across the room, and his expression darkened immediately. Before she could react, he was striding toward her, his jaw clenched. "Are you following me now, Miss Mitchell?" he demanded in a low, controlled voice. "This is beyond unprofessional." Laura stood slowly, keeping one hand protectively on Tommy's shoulder. "Contrary to what you might think, Mr. McKenney, the world doesn't revolve around you or your company." Her voice was calm but firm. "I've been volunteering here for 8 years. These children are my family." Tommy looked up at Jordan with curious eyes. "Miss Laura teaches us journalism. She says everyone has a story worth telling, even kids like us who don't have parents anymore." Jordan's expression shifted subtly, his eyes moving between Tommy and Laura. "You're an orphan?" he asked, his tone softer. "Was," Laura corrected gently, "but you never really stop being one. It just becomes part of your story." She turned to Tommy. "Why don't you go show Maria your new notebook? I bet she'd love to be your first interview subject." As Tommy scampered off, Laura faced Jordan fully. "I lost my parents in a car crash when I was 7. St. Mary's was my home until I aged out of the system. So no, Mr. McKenney, I'm not here to ambush you for an interview. Some things are more important than headlines." The silence between them was charged with something different now, understanding, perhaps, or respect. Before either could speak again, an elderly couple approached them. "Jordan, my boy," a distinguished-looking gentleman in his 70s called out warmly, "I thought I spotted you coming in." "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams," Jordan greeted them, his demeanor transforming instantly into that of the charming CEO. "I'm so pleased to see you both here." Laura recognized them immediately, Humphrey and Eleanor Williams, the power couple behind Williams Enterprise. Their reputation for philanthropy was as well known as their business acumen. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Mrs. Williams asked, her kind eyes twinkling as she looked at Laura. Before Jordan could speak, Laura extended her hand. "Laura Mitchell, ma'am. I volunteer with the children here." "Oh, how wonderful," Mrs. Williams exclaimed. We just watched the children perform. Such talent. And you teach them. Journalism and creative writing, Laura explained, her passion evident in her voice. Every child deserves to know their voice matters. As Laura and Mrs. Williams fell into an animated discussion about education and the arts, Jordan watched with growing interest. He'd been trying for months to secure a meeting with Humphrey Williams about investing in J-Tech's latest innovation, but the couple was notorious for their unique approach to business partnerships. They insisted on getting to know potential partners personally, preferably over dinner with their spouses or significant others. Jordan had been single for years, focusing entirely on building J-Tech. But watching Laura now, seeing how naturally she connected with the Williams, how her intelligence and compassion shone through every word, an idea began forming in his mind. Later that evening, after the Williams had departed, Jordan caught up with Laura as she was helping the children pack up their performance materials. "Miss Mitchell," he called out, his voice carrying a new note of consideration. "May I have a word?" Laura followed him to a quiet corner of the ballroom, curious about this sudden change in attitude. "If you're going to apologize for earlier, there's no need. I'm used to people making assumptions about me." "Actually," Jordan said, studying her carefully, "I have a proposition for you, one that could benefit us both." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "How would you like that exclusive interview you've been chasing?" Laura's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "What's the catch?" "Dinner, Friday night." He watched her reaction closely. "There's something I need to discuss with you, and if you agree to my terms, you'll get your interview. Exclusive, comprehensive, everything you want to know about J-Tech and its mysterious CEO." Laura's journalistic instincts were screaming that there was more to this sudden change of heart, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. "Friday night," she agreed, extending her hand to shake on it. Jordan took her hand, his grip firm and warm. "I'll send a car for you." As he turned to leave, he glanced back at her. "And Miss Mitchell, wear something elegant." As Laura watched him walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple dinner. Little did she know that this agreement would set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Friday evening arrived with an unexpected twist. Laura had spent hours selecting the perfect outfit from her limited wardrobe when her phone buzzed with a message from Jordan's driver, announcing his arrival. Descending the stairs of her apartment building, she found not just the sleek black Mercedes she'd expected, but also an elegantly wrapped package being presented to her by the chauffeur. "From Mr. McKenney, ma'am," the driver said, handling her a large luxury shopping bag. Inside, Laura found two stunning designer dresses, one in deep burgundy with intricate beading, the other a sophisticated brown silk that seemed to shimmer in the light. A small note card read simply, "Pick one." "He really doesn't do anything halfway, does he?" Laura muttered, fighting both annoyance and amusement at his presumption. She returned to her apartment, where Bridget had been helping her prepare. "Oh, my God," Bridget gasped, touching the dresses reverently. "Do you know how much these cost? The burgundy one alone is probably worth 3 months of my salary." Laura tried on both dresses, ultimately choosing the brown silk. It fit perfectly, as if it had been tailored specifically for her. The fabric draped elegantly, highlighting her curves while maintaining sophistication. With Bridget's help, she styled her hair in loose waves and applied subtle makeup that enhanced her natural beauty. When she returned to the waiting car, the driver's appreciative nod confirmed she'd made the right choice. The drive to Jordan's estate took them through the city's most exclusive neighborhood, finally arriving at a modernist mansion that seemed to float above the hillside. Jordan was waiting at the entrance, and for a moment, he seemed to forget himself, staring at her with unconcealed appreciation. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her car. "You clean up well, Miss Mitchell," he said, recovering his composure. "You sound surprised," she replied with a raised eyebrow. "Did you think I spent all my time in reporters' notebooks and comfortable shoes?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face as he led her to a waiting Rolls-Royce. Once inside, Laura turned to him. "So, Shall we begin the interview while we drive? About that, Jordan said, his expression growing serious. There's something we need to discuss first. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. The dinner tonight isn't just dinner. We're meeting Humphrey and Eleanor Williams. Laura's journalistic instincts immediately sparked. The same Williams from the charity event? Yes, and I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend. The car fell silent as Laura processed his words. I'm sorry, what? Jordan explained about the Williams' unique approach to business partnerships, their belief in the importance of personal connections, and the potential investment that could revolutionize J-Tech's future. They only do business with people after a double date with their spouses or partners, he finished. And you made quite an impression on Eleanor at the charity event. Laura laughed incredulously. So your sudden interest in granting me an interview wasn't about my persistence or journalistic integrity. You just needed a fake girlfriend? I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement, Jordan replied smoothly. You get your exclusive interview, and I get a chance to secure a vital investment for my company. Laura considered her options. The interview could revive her blog, but pretending to be Jordan McKenney's girlfriend carried its own risks. Terms, she said finally. I want them clear and in writing, and I want more than just an audio interview. I want full video, at your office, and complete access. Jordan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Deal. Now, we met 3 months ago at an art gallery opening. You were covering the event for your blog, and we bonded over our shared appreciation of modern art. Bold of you to assume I know anything about modern art, Laura interjected. The Rothko in your last article about urban spaces suggests otherwise, Jordan replied, surprising her with his knowledge of her work. The rest of the drive was spent establishing their relationship backstory. By the time they arrived at Le Cirque, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, Laura felt reasonably prepared for their performance. The Williams were already seated when they arrived. Jordan's hand found the small of Laura's back as they approached the table, the gesture so natural it almost startled her. Mrs. Williams beamed at their arrival, while Mr. Williams rose to greet them. Laura, dear, that dress is absolutely stunning, Mrs. Williams exclaimed, embracing her warmly. Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Jordan has excellent taste, Laura replied, shooting him a private smile that perfectly conveyed the affection expected of a smitten girlfriend. The dinner progressed smoothly, with Laura and Mrs. Williams falling into easy conversation about everything from literature to social causes. When the men excused themselves to discuss business, Mrs. Williams leaned forward conspiratorially. Tell me, dear, how did you really meet Jordan? He's been so private all these years, I can hardly believe he's finally found someone special. Laura launched into their practice story about the art gallery, but added personal touches, how Jordan had corrected her interpretation of a particular piece, leading to a heated debate that ended in coffee and conversation. The fabricated story flowed naturally, enhanced by her genuine observations of Jordan's character over their few encounters. You know, Mrs. Williams said thoughtfully, in all our years of business dinners, I've never seen Humphrey so impressed with a young couple. Jordan clearly adores you. Laura glanced across the restaurant, where Jordan and Mr. Williams were deep in conversation. As if sensing her gaze, Jordan looked up, meeting her eyes with an expression that seemed to hold more warmth than their arrangement warranted. The evening concluded with Mrs. Williams insisting they all attend the upcoming charity tennis tournament at the Williams Country Club. We host it every year, she explained, pressing a VIP pass into Laura's hands. It would be wonderful to have you both there. In the car ride back, Jordan's relief was palpable. That went better than I could have hoped, he said. The Williams never invite potential partners to their private events this quickly. Well, I aim to please, Laura replied dryly, though you might have warned me about the tennis tournament. I assume that means our arrangement needs to continue? Jordan nodded, looking slightly apologetic. Just until the deal is secured. I'll make it worth your while. Say, an additional vlog series about J-Tech's daily operations. Laura considered this. 2 vlogs, and I want them to showcase the human side of J-Tech, not just corporate propaganda. Always negotiating, Jordan remarked, but his tone held something like admiration. "Deal." As the car pulled up to her apartment building, Laura turned to him. "You know, for someone who doesn't like interviews, you're surprisingly good at playing a role." Jordan helped her out of the car, his hand lingering slightly longer than necessary. "Who says I'm playing a role?" he replied enigmatically, before bidding her good night. Watching the Rolls-Royce disappear into the night, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement. The warm weight of his hand on her back still lingered, and the way he'd looked at her across the restaurant. She shook her head, reminding herself that it was all just an act, wasn't it? The decision to move into Jordan's estate came after several media outlets published photos of them from the charity dinner. It would look suspicious if we're supposedly in a relationship but living separately, Jordan had argued, and Laura, recognizing the logic, reluctantly agreed. Moving into Jordan's mansion was like stepping into another world. The sprawling estate, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist architecture, housed an art collection that would make museum curators envious. Laura's modest belongings looked almost comically out of place in the guest suite that was now her temporary home. The first few days were awkward. Jordan was rarely home, leaving before dawn and returning late into the night. Laura worked from the estate's expansive library, converting one corner into her makeshift office. The house staff moved around her like well-oiled machinery, efficient but distant, making her feel more like an intruder than a resident. One evening, after a particularly lonely day of working on her blog, Laura wandered into the kitchen. The head chef had already left for the day, leaving behind a note about Jordan's usual takeout preferences. Looking at the fully stocked kitchen, Laura made a decision. 3 hours later, the dining room table was set with an array of dishes: herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, quinoa pilaf, and a dark chocolate mousse for dessert. Laura had just finished lighting the candles when she heard Jordan's key in the door. "I'm not hungry," he called out as he passed the dining room, barely glancing at the spread. "I had a working dinner." Laura watched him head toward the stairs, then called out casually, "That's a shame. I suppose I'll have to find something else to trade for the Rothko." Jordan froze mid-step, then slowly turned around. "What did you say?" "The Rothko," Laura repeated innocently. "The one that usually hangs in the East Wing lobby. Lovely piece. Worth what, $2 million? Jordan's face darkened as he strode to the lobby, finding the wall empty where his prized painting should have been. "Where is it?" he demanded, returning to the dining room. "Safe," Laura assured him, taking her seat at the table. "I'll be happy to return it after you join me for dinner. I did spend 3 hours cooking after all." For a moment, Jordan looked like he might explode. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. "You know, most people would consider this blackmail." "I prefer to think of it as aggressive negotiation," Laura replied, echoing his words from their first dinner date. "Now, are you going to sit down, or should I start considering auction houses?" Shaking his head in disbelief, Jordan removed his suit jacket and sat down. "You're either the bravest or the most foolish person I've ever met." The salmon was perfectly cooked, the flavors melding beautifully. Jordan took a bite, and his eyebrows rose in surprise. "This is actually excellent." "Try not to sound so shocked," Laura said dryly. "I did manage to feed myself before becoming your fake girlfriend." As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Jordan talked about his day, venting about a problematic board member who was resistant to change. Laura shared stories about her early days of blogging, including a disastrous interview where she'd accidentally spilled coffee on a senator. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Jordan asked as he helped himself to seconds. "St. Mary's," Laura replied. "Sister Margaret believed every child should know how to cook, said it was both a life skill and a form of therapy." She smiled at the memory. "She used to let me help in the kitchen when I couldn't sleep, which was often after my parents died." Jordan's expression softened. "My mother taught me to cook," he offered unexpectedly. "Before she got sick. I haven't cooked properly in years, but I remember everything she showed me." It was the first personal detail he'd voluntarily shared, and Laura recognized it for the gift it was. After dinner, she returned the Rothko to its place, and Jordan helped her clear the table, a task she suspected his staff had never seen him do before. This became their ritual. Laura would cook dinner several times a week, and Jordan would make it home in time to join her. Sometimes they talked business, other times art or literature. Occasionally they simply sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the meal and each other's company. One evening, as Laura was preparing pasta, Jordan came home earlier than usual, his expression troubled. "The new software launch isn't getting the response we hoped for," he admitted, loosening his tie. "The market's skeptical about the security features." Laura listened as he explained the technical aspects, then surprised him by asking insightful questions about the marketing strategy. "Your PR team is focusing on the wrong angle," she said finally. "You're trying to sell it as a security solution, but what you've actually created is peace of mind. That's what people want to buy." Jordan stared at her for a long moment. "Would you be willing to look at our PR materials? Give us your perspective?" The next day, Laura found herself in JTech's marketing department, reviewing their campaign strategy. She rewrote press releases, suggested new angles for feature articles, and helped craft a social media strategy that emphasized real-world applications over technical specifications. 2 weeks later, JTech's stock price jumped 15% as positive reviews and user testimonials flooded in. The software's adoption rate tripled, and industry analysts who had been skeptical were now singing its praises. "The board is impressed," Jordan told her over dinner that evening. "They want to know if you'd consider consulting on our future launches." Laura looked up from her plate, surprised. "Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? I'm supposed to be your girlfriend, not your employee. You're also a skilled communications professional who just helped us turn a potential failure into a major success," Jordan pointed out. "Besides, Mr. Williams was particularly impressed when I mentioned your involvement. He said it reminded him of how his wife helped save their company years ago." Laura considered this as she twirled pasta around her fork. "I'll do it on one condition. I maintain editorial independence with my blog. If I think something about JTech deserves criticism, I need to be free to write about it." Jordan nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you." As she watched him return to his meal, Laura realized something had shifted between them. The lines between their fake relationship and real partnership were becoming increasingly blurred. She found herself looking forward to their dinners not because of their arrangement, but because she genuinely enjoyed his company. The way his eyes crinkled when he really smiled, how he absent-mindedly ran his fingers through his hair when he was thinking deeply, the subtle ways he showed he was listening even when working on something else. These details had become familiar, even precious. What scared her most was the suspicion that Jordan might be feeling the same way. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that had nothing to do with their pretense, and everything to do with genuine affection. But neither of them dared to acknowledge it, both aware that their arrangement had an expiration date. For now, they continued their dance of pretense and reality, each dinner bringing them closer to a truth neither was ready to face. As summer faded into autumn, Laura and Jordan's arrangement had evolved into something that felt increasingly less like an act. One crisp Saturday morning, Jordan surprised Laura by announcing they were going out. "Where to?" she asked, looking up from her laptop where she'd been working on her latest blog post. "You'll see," he replied with an enigmatic smile that made her heart skip a beat, something that had been happening more frequently lately. The car drove them to the city's most exclusive shopping district, stopping in front of Valentino. Laura's eyes widened. "Jordan, this isn't necessary. The Williams anniversary gala is next week," he cut in smoothly. "And while you look stunning in everything, I thought you might enjoy picking something yourself this time, rather than having me send options." Inside, Laura found herself surrounded by more luxury than she'd ever experienced. As she browsed through racks of designer dresses, she caught Jordan watching her with an expression that seemed far too genuine for their pretense. "What about this one?" she asked, holding up a midnight blue gown with intricate beading. "Try it on," he encouraged, settling into one of the plush chairs outside the fitting room. When Laura emerged in the dress, Jordan's sharp intake of breath was audible. The gown hugged her curves perfectly, the deep blue making her eyes appear almost luminescent. "Well?" she asked, turning slowly. Jordan stood approaching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "It's perfect," he said softly, his hand reaching out to touch the fabric at her waist, before catching himself and pulling back. They left with not just the gown, but several other pieces Jordan insisted she needed. "Consider it an investment in our cover story," he said when she protested the expense. But there was something in his voice that suggested he had other motivations. Later that evening, instead of their usual dinner at home, Jordan took her to a small, exclusive restaurant, hidden away in the city's historic district. "How did you know about this place?" Laura asked, amazed by the intimate atmosphere and exquisite menu. "I did my research," Jordan admitted. "You mentioned once that you love French cuisine but hate pretentious restaurants. This place has 3 Michelin stars but feels like dining in someone's home." The fact that he'd remembered such a casual comment, let alone acted on it, stirred something warm in Laura's chest. Over candlelight, they shared dishes and stories, their laughter drawing fond looks from other diners who surely saw them as nothing more than a couple in love. As weeks passed, their professional lives became increasingly intertwined. Jordan had taken to running major decisions by Laura, valuing her perspective on both business and public relations matters. She had an uncanny ability to spot potential issues before they arose, and her solutions were often elegantly simple. "You should have been a CEO," he told her one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports in his home office. Laura smiled, tucking her legs under her on the leather sofa. "And give up my thrilling life of chasing stories? Never." She paused, then added more seriously, "Although, I have to admit, seeing business from this side has been fascinating. Seeing it through your eyes has been enlightening," Jordan replied, his gaze lingering on her face longer than necessary. "You have a way of cutting through the corporate nonsense and seeing what really matters." Their shared appreciation for art had become another bridge between them. Jordan began taking her to gallery openings, genuinely interested in her interpretation of various pieces. She discovered he had an eye for emerging artists, often investing in works before they became widely recognized. One rainy Sunday, they spent hours in his private gallery, with Jordan explaining the stories behind each piece in his collection. Laura was struck by how animated he became when discussing art, his usual corporate mask falling away to reveal genuine passion. "This one," he said, stopping before an abstract piece, "reminded me of you when I first saw it." Laura studied the canvas, taking in the bold strokes of color that seemed to dance across the surface. "How so?" "It's complex but honest," he explained softly, "beautiful without trying to be. And every time you look at it, you see something new." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither dared to acknowledge. The subtle moments of care between them multiplied. Jordan started keeping Laura's favorite tea stocked in his office. Laura learned to recognize when he was stressed and would leave encouraging notes with his morning coffee. They developed 1,000 little habits that spoke of intimacy beyond their arrangement. But with these growing feelings came an increasing sense of dread. Their contract had a deadline, and neither knew how to address the reality that their hearts had stopped playing by the rules. One evening, Laura found Jordan in his study, looking troubled. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "Just thinking," he replied, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she now knew meant he was wrestling with something significant. "Want to talk about it?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment, she thought he might say something to shatter their carefully maintained pretense. Instead, he smiled slightly and said, "Not yet." Laura nodded, understanding. They were both dancing around the truth, that somewhere between the fake dates and real conversations, between the business meetings and quiet dinners, they'd fallen for each other. But admitting it would make it real, and real meant vulnerable. For two people who had built their lives on careful control, that was terrifying. As she turned to leave, Jordan called out softly, "Laura?" "Yes?" "Thank you for everything." The words were simple, but his tone carried volumes of unspoken meaning. Laura felt her heart constrict as she replied, "Always." That night, lying in her bed in the guest suite, Laura stared at the ceiling, acknowledging what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was in love with Jordan McKinney, not the CEO, not the fake boyfriend, but the man who got excited about art, who remembered how she took her coffee, who looked at her sometimes like she was a puzzle he was desperate to solve. In his own room, Jordan sat at his desk, staring at the contract that detailed their arrangement. In less than a month, it would end. The thought made his chest tight in a way no business deal ever had. He'd planned everything so carefully, but he hadn't planned for this, for her to become not just essential to his business, but essential to him. The day of their planned breakup arrived with a weight neither had anticipated. They had orchestrated everything carefully. A public appearance at a popular restaurant where they would be seen having an intense but quiet discussion, followed by Laura leaving alone. The tabloids would speculate, sources would confirm their separation, and their 4-month facade would end exactly as planned. Laura stood in front of her mirror in the guest suite, packing the last of her belongings. The room had become more than just a temporary space. It held memories of late-night conversations, shared laughter, and moments when pretense fell away. She picked up the midnight blue Valentino dress hanging in the closet, the one that had made Jordan's breath catch, and carefully folded it into her suitcase. "The car's ready," Jordan said from the doorway, his voice carefully neutral. He looked impeccable as always in his tailored suit, but there was a tension in his shoulders that betrayed his discomfort. "I'll be down in a minute," Laura replied, not quite meeting his eyes. She had script prepared for their public breakup, but the words felt hollow now. At the restaurant, they played their parts perfectly. Jordan spoke quietly but intensely, while Laura dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. When she finally stood and walked out, leaving Jordan alone at the table, the other diners watched with sympathy. It was a masterclass in public deception. The following weeks were torture for both of them. Laura threw herself into her work, her blog thriving with the increased attention from their breakup. She had positioned herself perfectly during their relationship, gaining exclusive access to business and social events that had previously been closed to her. Her readership had quadrupled, and major media outlets were regularly citing her articles. But success felt empty without their shared dinners, without Jordan's quiet encouragement, without the 1,000 small moments that had become essential to her daily life. She found herself cooking elaborate meals for one, missing the way Jordan's eyes would light up at her culinary experiments. Jordan, meanwhile, was struggling more than he cared to admit. He caught himself turning to share observations with Laura during meetings, only to remember she wasn't there. His home felt cavernous and cold without her presence. One evening, he found himself standing in his private gallery before the abstract painting he'd said reminded him of her, realizing with startling clarity that he'd been a fool. A month after their breakup, Laura was preparing for a quiet evening at home when her phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. "Have dinner with me. No contracts, no pretense." Laura stared at the message, her heart racing. Before she could reply, another text came through. "I'll pick you up myself. No driver, no designer dresses, just us." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed, "Yes." At exactly 7, Laura heard a car pull up outside her apartment. Looking out the window, she saw Jordan himself behind the wheel of an Aston Martin, not his usual chauffeured Rolls-Royce. He was wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt, a sight so rare it made her smile. When she opened her door, Jordan's eyes softened at the sight of her in a simple black dress, one she'd bought herself, not one he'd given her. "You look beautiful," he said softly, and this time there was no audience to perform for. Instead of taking her to an exclusive restaurant, Jordan drove them to a small Italian place in her neighborhood. "I've been wanting to try this place since you mentioned it was your favorite," he admitted as they were seated. Over plates of homemade pasta, they talked, really talked, without the constraints of their previous arrangement. Jordan spoke about his fears of becoming like his father, who had prioritized business success over family. Laura shared her struggles with rebuilding her life after the accident, admitting how vulnerable it had made her feel. "I miss you," Jordan said suddenly, setting down his fork. "Not for the business deals or public appearances. I miss the way you hide my favorite paintings when I work too late. I miss your terrible puns during board meeting preparations. I miss the way you challenge me to be better, not just as a CEO, but as a person." Laura's heart thundered in her chest. "I miss you too," she whispered. "I miss our quiet moments in the gallery, how you remember every little detail I mention, how you look at me sometimes like I'm the most fascinating puzzle you've ever encountered." Jordan reached across the table, taking her hand. "I fell in love with you somewhere between your first culinary hostage situation and your brilliant PR strategies. And it terrified me because it wasn't part of the plan." "When did you realize?" Laura asked, her fingers intertwining with his. "Remember that rainy Sunday in the gallery, when I showed you the abstract painting and said it reminded me of you? That's when I knew I was in trouble." He smiled softly. "When did you know?" "The night you came home stressed about the software launch. You didn't just listen to my suggestions, you trusted them. You saw me as an equal, not just a convenient solution to your business needs." Jordan's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "So what do we do now? No contracts, no pretense, no expiration date?" Laura met his gaze steadily. "We start over, for real this time. Though I have to warn you, I might still hold your art collection hostage occasionally." Jordan laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They left the restaurant hand in hand, no longer concerned about who might see them or what stories might circulate. In the weeks that followed, they built something real from the foundation of their pretense. Laura maintained her editorial independence, sometimes publishing articles that criticized JTech's policies, but now their discussions about such matters happened over home-cooked meals in their shared home. Their relationship became a different kind of partnership, one based on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine love. And when Mr. and Mrs. Williams attended their wedding a year later, they smiled knowingly, having recognized long ago what Laura and Jordan had taken months to admit: that sometimes the best love stories start with a little pretense, but end with absolute truth.